the next terms over here. Now there are certain substances. Now when we are talking about water, let us relate water to certain salts. Now there are certain salts which contain some water molecules in them. Now such salts which contains water molecules in them in loose chemical combination, we call them as hydrated salts or hydrated substances. Hydrated salts or hydrated substances. That means what? I'll just write down in short over here. That is salts or the substances which contain water molecules in loose chemical combination with them. Are called as the hydrated substances or hydrated salts. Let me give you certain examples. A very common example which we come across very often, that is our copper sulfate pentahydrate. So the formula is what? CuSO4 dot 5H2O. Now what does this dot represents over here? This dot represents that the 5 molecules have been combined chemically with the copper sulfate. So this salt which contains this 5 molecules of water, this salt we call this as this is an example of hydrated salt. There are some few more examples of hydrated salts like the Epsom salt, then we have the washing soda and so on, that I'll give you certain examples later on. Okay, now so this salt is called as the hydrated salt, and this water molecules which are attached to this salt, we call this as water of crystallization. Water of crystallization. Okay, now what is this role of water of crystallization? How is it helpful? So this water of crystallization, it gives the molecules of the molecules of the salt, gives the molecules of the salt the proper crystal structure. That means it gives a crystalline shape. Whatever may be the shape of the salt is because of this water molecules. It also gives the molecules of the salt a proper color. Okay. Now let us see what exactly happens when this salt that has been heated, that is copper sulfate pentahydrate, when we heat it, now this is originally blue in color, blue color crystals. So when we heat it, it loses this 5 molecules of water of crystallization, so we write down over here, plus this 5 molecules of water which has been lost, we are writing down separately over here. And this turns into a white anhydrous amorphous powder. So when these hydrated salts are heated, they will lose this water molecules because the water molecules are in loose chemical combination. So that they will turn into the powder. So because the water molecules are lost, water molecules were responsible for giving a shape. Water molecules are also responsible for giving the blue color to the copper sulfate. So as we heat it, the shape is also lost, the blue color is also lost. So what do we mean by anhydrous? Anhydrous means the substances which is not having any molecules of water, which is the salt which has lost its water of crystallization, or the salts not having any water molecules, that is called as the anhydrous. Amorphous means what? Substances of the salts which is not having a proper crystal structure. When there is no crystal structure, no proper shape is there, so that is called as amorphous. So it crumbles down to form a white anhydrous amorphous powder, or you can say a residue that has been formed, which is a white anhydrous amorphous powder. So this is very important. This is a very important question that is asked in your examination most of the times. That is what happens, what do you observe when the blue colored crystals of copper sulfate are heated. So the keywords that you have to use over here, that is when copper sulfate has been heated, it loses its blue color and it turns into a white anhydrous amorphous powder. Very, very important part of this particular concept over here. And when we add water to this, what will happen? You will find that if you are carrying out this experiment in a test tube, when you are adding water, some few drops of water has been added, those that powder which is there in the test tube, it will again turn to blue color. Let me show you exactly what happens over here. And the same time, anhydrous also I will be discussing with you later in detail. So let me first show you exactly when we heat it what is happening. So this is our test tube. And we take some blue colored crystals of copper sulfate over here. So I am just drawing it with a blue pen over here, blue marker over here. So we can write down over here blue crystals of CuSO4.5H2O. Now let us heat it. When we heat this test tube, with the help of Bunsen burner in the laboratory, we'll find that there will be some vapors will be formed over here. So this will be formed on the upper cooler parts of the test tube, some vapors. Now as these vapors, when these vapors cool, we know that when vapors are cooled, what happens? They go to the liquid state. So when these vapors are being cooled, they will turn into a liquid. And somehow if we collect this liquid and we test it, it will give a positive test for water, indicating that the liquid which was formed was nothing but it was water. Now what is the test for identification of water? That is if you are having your blue cobalt chloride paper. So blue cobalt chloride paper, blue cobalt chloride paper, that is CoCl2, it turns to pink in presence of water molecules. So when you bring this liquid in contact with the blue cobalt chloride paper, it will turn to pink, indicating a positive test for presence of water, indicating that the salt has lost the water molecules. Another test for this is that if this liquid is again brought back into this copper sulfate, the copper sulfate which has turned to white anhydrous amorphous powder, it will turn to blue color again, that is it will regain back its color. So this is also one of the tests, that is water whenever it has been added to anhydrous white copper sulfate, the anhydrous white copper sulfate turns to blue color, and that is also another test for identification of your water molecules. So these are the two things, that is this is how we test for water molecules, and this is what happens when the hydrated salts that have been heated. Okay, now we'll move on to certain salts which is possessing this water molecules, that is water crystallization. So common name of certain salts, then chemical name and formula. Alright, so first salt over here, let us take washing soda. Washing soda. What is washing soda? Washing soda is nothing but is sodium carbonate decahydrate. So it is sodium carbonate decahydrate. Formula is Na2CO3.10H2O. That means sodium carbonate contains 10 molecules of water of crystallization. Next is Epsom salt. Epsom salt. Now what is Epsom salt? It is hydrated magnesium sulfate. So we can write down over here magnesium sulfate. Magnesium sulfate heptahydrate. That means it contains 7 molecules of water of crystallization. So MgSO4.7H2O. Next is our sulfate. So global salt is sodium sulfate decahydrate, sodium sulfate decahydrate. So again, sodium sulfate, it contains 10 molecules of water crystallization. So this will be Na2SO4.10H2O. Next, we move on to the next example, that is your potash alum. Potash alum. I'll write down a little bit this side because I'm finding the space is very short over there. So what is potash alum? Potash alum is nothing but is a hydrated potassium aluminium sulfate. So what we'll be writing down over here, that is K2SO4, formula K2SO4 dot Al2SO4 thrice, and contains 24 molecules of water crystallization. So we put over here dot and 24 H2O. Next we have the blue vitriol. Blue vitriol. So blue vitriol is hydrated. There is copper sulfate, which I have shown you some time back. So hydrated copper 2 sulfate, or we can say hydrated copper 2 sulfate. Now it contains the 5 molecules of water, so we can also call this hydrated copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate. Pentahydrate. So that will be the complete name. Usually when we call it, we just call it as a copper 2 sulfate, but it is assumed that it contains the 5 molecules of water crystallization. So, but here when we write down over here, it shows that it contains the 5 molecules of water crystallization. So this will be, even if it's not, when you see the crystals of copper sulfate blue color, it means that it is a pentahydrate. It contains those 5 molecules of water crystallization. So here this will be CuSO4.5H2O. Then next we have the plaster of Paris. Sixth example is our plaster of Paris, and plaster of Paris is our plaster of Paris is hydrated calcium sulfate. Plaster of Paris is calcium sulfate semi-hydrate calcium sulfate semi-hydrate. That is, it contains half molecules of water crystallization. So let me show you that it is CaSO4.half H2O. Then we have the white vitriol. White vitriol. Now white vitriol is nothing but it is a zinc sulfate containing 7 molecules of water crystallization. So zinc sulfate heptahydrate. So the formula will be ZnSO4.7H2O. The last example we have is the gypsum salt. Gypsum salt, so that is nothing but it is a hydrated calcium sulfate. So here it contains 2 molecules of water crystallization. So we write down that is CaSO4.2H2O. Okay, so these are certain salts which contains the water molecules. See that you learn the common names and the chemical names along with the number of molecules of water crystallization. So let me just check that I have included all the examples over here, whatever that I wanted to discuss with you. Okay. Next so this is for the hydrated salts. We move on to the next term over here, that is anhydrous. Now what do we mean by anhydrous? I already told you that the salt which has lost its water molecules, that is called as the anhydrous salt. So we can say anhydrous means what? anhydrous salts, or the term anhydrous means what? Salts which does not contain salts, which does not contain, or the salts having no molecule, which does not possess, which does not have any molecules of water of crystallization. That is, the salts which does not contain any water molecules, those are called as the anhydrous salts. Not only this, there are certain substances. Now, just a minute, let me just give you certain examples of this NH3. This is what? Ammonia. And when we add water to this, it is forming what? Ammonium hydroxide. Similarly, hydrogen chloride gas. When we are adding water to this, it is forming what? Hydrochloric acid. That is in the liquid form. So this is a hydrochloric acid. So here this is with the water molecules, and this is the same substance without the water molecules. This also the same, that is in the liquid state, and this is in the gaseous form. So we can also say anhydrous also means compounds, that is we can call them as a certain gaseous form of certain substances. We can say gaseous form of certain substances which does not have any water molecules. That is, this ammonium hydroxide is actually ammonia and water, and when you remove water from ammonium hydroxide, this is the anhydrous solution which is in the gaseous form. This is also in the liquid form, that is a hydrous form, and when this has been dried out in the initial stage without adding water to this was also the anhydrous substance. So we can say the compounds which are in the gaseous form, which does not contain any water molecules, they can also be called as the anhydrous. So this term anhydrous is not, it's applicable to salts, at the same time it is also applicable to certain gases which does not contain any water molecules. Basically, the term anhydrous means what? Substances which is not having any water molecules. Now, how a substance, suppose a substance has been hydrated, contains some water molecules, how can we convert into anhydrous? So, hydrated substances, it can be converted into anhydrous. Anhydrous. How can we convert it? There are certain ways by which hydrated substances can be converted into hydrated. That is by direct heating. Direct heating, as I have shown you, the copper sulfate, when you directly heat it, loses its molecules of water crystallization. Then heating in dry and hot air. Heating in dry and hot air. Heating in vacuum. When you heat it in vacuum, at the same time, if you are heating a substance in, or keeping a substance in a desiccating agent, along with the desiccating agent, so introducing or keeping the substance in a desiccator or in contact with desiccating agent. Now, what is a desiccating agent? Substances which absorb the water molecules, which are also used for drying. Those substances are called as desiccating agent. I give you certain examples. That is concentrated sulfuric acid. It is used as a drying agent as well as a desiccating agent. Along with this, there is calcium oxide, there is quicklime, phosphorus pentaoxide, that is P2O5, quicklime is calcium oxide. All these substances, they are useful for removing the water molecules, and they are also called as the desiccating agents. Sometimes when we prepare certain gases in the laboratory and they contain the water molecules, so we need to dry those gases, so we just bring them in contact with this drying agents or the desiccating agents, so that this is by certain ways by which the hydrated salts, it can be converted into anhydrous. Okay, so next that we move on, that is, okay, now there are certain salts which does not contain any water molecules. So let me give you certain examples. There is, we are not converting them into anhydrous, but the salts themselves, they do not contain any water molecules. So let us go through the examples of those salts which does not contain any water molecules. That is, naturally they do not contain any water molecules. Means you are not removing the water molecules, but those salts, they naturally do not contain any water molecules. For example, our common salt, that is NaCl, or potassium nitrate. Okay. Now, what happens when a salt which does not contain any water molecules, when that salt that has been heated? Now, one more thing over here, that this salt, sodium chloride, it is also having a proper crystal structure, but that is not due to the water crystallization. These substances, they have got no water molecules over here. So, the shape of this salt, the proper crystal shape of this salt is not because of the water molecule. So, we can say one thing, that is water crystallization is responsible for imparting the shape and color to the salt. But there are certain salts which has got a proper crystal structure, a proper color also, in spite of the fact that they do not possess any water molecules in them. That is a natural way of the, that is, you can say, that is a nature of those substances, that they possess a proper crystal structure. So in certain salts, the crystal structure and the color is due to water crystallization. But all the salts, they do not possess the water crystallization. That is, naturally there are certain substances where no water molecules are present in them, but in spite of no molecules of water in them, they will be having a proper crystal shape as well as a proper color. Now let us see what happens when these substances, when they are heated. We know that when hydrated substances are being heated, they become the anhydrous. But the salts which are not having any water molecules, what happens to them? So sodium chloride, when we heat it, will find it produces a crackling sound. Now this crackling sound we also call as decrepitation. Okay, so we can say sodium chloride decrepitates, and this is called as decrepitation. The process of producing this, we call this as decrepitation. Okay. Let's see what happens to potassium nitrate. Potassium nitrate, when we are heating it, it will form KNO2, that is potassium nitrite plus oxygen. That is vapor, so that is a colorless, odorless gas will be given out. That is nothing but is a oxygen gas. And this over here is a potassium nitrite. Will find that is a light yellow colored liquid. Light yellow colored liquid. So we can say this crystal, it will first melt to form a light yellow colored liquid along with the evolution or with the giving out of a colorless, odorless gas, which is oxygen. So this is what happens to the salts which has got no water molecules with them. Our next term of discussion is with the solubility. Okay, so we come back to a term that is solubility, which I have discussed with you in the previous video also. So when this, so in the previous class, I discussed about you with the solubility. Now what is solubility? So solubility is the amount of solute that dissolves in 100 grams of the solvent to form a saturated solution at a particular temperature. That is, so I repeat once again, solubility is the amount of solute that dissolves in 100 grams of the solvent at a particular temperature to form a saturated solution. Now look here, I have just drawn a graph over here where solubility I am representing on the y-axis and temperature on the x-axis. That is temperature in Celsius over the x-axis. So we can see there is a variation of in solubility of different substances with temperature. So we can look over here, that is for calcium sulfate, solubility decreases with rise in temperature. Potassium sulfate, this is the temperature, and this solubility it rises with increase in temperature. Similarly over here also, but the increase is not too much. Same over here in case of potassium nitrate, you can see there is an increase over here. Same thing happens over here. There is sodium nitrate also, so the solubility increases with increase in temperature. Then in case of potassium bromide, there is an increase. Potassium chloride also, there is a slight increase. Sodium chloride, the solubility there is not much increase with the rise in temperature. It is you can see that is a steadily the line is a straight line over here, so there is not much increase with the rise in temperature in case of sodium chloride. There is only a little bit it increases with the rise in temperature. So when we plot a graph in this way, that is when you study the solubility with respect to temperature, this gives rise to several curves over here. We call that as a solubility curve. So what is solubility curve? We can say solubility curve is a line graph. So solubility curve we can call it is a line graph. It is a line graph which helps in studying the solubility of different solutes in a solvent, which helps in studying the solubility of different solutes in a solvent against temperature. Or we can say different temperatures. These are all the line graphs. So what is the advantage? What is the advantages of making this solubility curve? We can study that first of all different salts are there. We can study the solubility of different solutes in a particular solvent at a particular temperature. We come to know from this. At the same time, solubility of different substances can be compared. From this, looking at this, we can say that the sodium chloride, the solubility does not increase much. It increases only a little bit. But in case of potassium nitrate, it increases too much. So in this way, different solubility of different substances, it can be compared. We can know the solubility of different solutes in a particular solvent at a particular temperature from the solubility curve. At the same time, what happens when a substance, the saturated solution of a particular solute that has been cooled? You take a saturated solution of a particular substance and when you cool it, what happens to that? So look here, suppose if you are having a saturated solution of a particular salt. You have prepared this saturated solution by heating it at 40 degrees Celsius. Okay, and if you are cooling it down, you are bringing down the temperature to 15 degrees Celsius, you will find you will be getting the crystals of this particular solute. The saturated solution is solute in a solvent. So what you will be getting? You will be getting the crystals of this particular solute. When you are bringing down the temperature from 40 degree to 15 degrees Celsius. At the same time, suppose if you are having a saturated solution of a particular salt and you heat it. Now this will become unsaturated. This solution which is already saturated, when you are increasing the temperature, it becomes capable to dissolve more of the solute. So this solution, it becomes unsaturated. So what can we do? What can we say? Solubility curve also helps us to know the effect of temperature on various types of solutions. So first is that we come to know the solubility of different solutes in a particular solvent at a particular temperature. We can also compare the solubilities of different substances. This is the second point. And the third point is what? From the solubility curve, we can know the effect of changes in temperature on various types of solutions. So we can just we can write it down in short. Just in short, I'll write down over here. That is, it helps in studying the solubility of various solutes in a particular solvent at a particular temperature. Same way, it also has the solubility of various solutes at different temperatures. We come to at different temperatures also. Third point I am writing down over here, because down you may not be able to see. We can compare the solubility. We can compare the solubility of different substances. We can compare the solubility of different solutes. Okay. Fourth point, what can we come to know? We can study the changes in temperature. Changes in temperature on various types of solutions. That is the example which I gave you just now. So these are the certain advantages of the solubility curve. Now usually what happens with the increase in temperature, the solubility also increases. But there are certain substances, certain salts, what happens when we heat them, their solubility increases. But after a certain temperature, the solubility decreases. So this type of solubility, we call this as anomalous solubility. Anomalous solubility. So look here, I'll give you an example, that is our sodium sulfate decahydrate. Sodium sulfate decahydrate, when we are heating it, the solubility increases. Now there is an increase in solubility only up to a temperature of 32.8 degrees Celsius. And after that, the solubility, you can see it starts decreasing. So this behavior of such type of substances, we call this as anomalous solubility. What can we say? There is a temperature below 32.8 degrees Celsius, this salt is hydrated. And at a temperature above 32.8 degrees Celsius, it becomes the anhydrous substance only. Okay, so we have studied about solubility and various advantages and applications of solubility. Now there are certain reactions where the solubility is affected with the change in temperature. Now let us see what of those reactions. First of all, let us come to reactions such as endothermic reactions. Now what are endothermic reactions? Reactions where heat energy has been absorbed, where it brings a cooling effect. That means heat energy will be taken in, absorbed. Absorption of heat energy takes in. So obviously with increase in temperature, solubility increases. That means here, because the heat is absorbed, they require the temperature. So increase in temperature, the solubility of a solute in a particular solvent will be favored with the increase in temperature. As the temperature will increase, the solubility of the solute in a solvent will increase. Decrease in temperature will find that is, as the temperature decreases, solubility also decreases. Okay. The next type of reactions, that is, okay, I'll give you an example over here, that is potassium nitrate, KNO3. So this is what happens in case of potassium nitrate. We find that the solubility increases with the increase in temperature. And so look here, there is this time. So here it is potassium nitrate, and you can see with the increase in temperature, the solubility of potassium nitrate, it increases with the increase in solubility. Okay, and decreases with the solubility increases with increase in temperature, and the solubility decreases with decrease in temperature. Next type of reactions which are dependent on temperature and solubility, there is the exothermic reactions. Exothermic reactions, once again I remind you, what type of reactions are those? Exothermic reactions are those reactions where heat energy has been evolved, heat is given off. So always when heat is already given off, more heat if you supply to the reaction over here, it will not favor. So we'll find decrease in temperature. Decrease in temperature. When the temperature decreases, solubility will increase. Solubility will increase. At the same time, increase in temperature, if the temperature increases, solubility is going to decrease. So this is with regards to the exothermic reactions. I give an example over here, that is where the temperature, there is an exothermic reaction. Now look here, there is calcium hydroxide. When you put this calcium hydroxide in water, what happens? It's an exothermic reaction. The container becomes hot. Container becomes hot. Becomes hot because it's an exothermic reaction. So over there, if you further increase the temperature, we'll find that the solubility will decrease. But on the contrary to this, if you decrease the temperature, you bring down the temperature, that is decreased temperature decreases, the solubility will increase. Okay, so these are the two reactions where the solubility comes over here in picture along with the temperature. So solubility curve. Next we proceed with effect of pressure and temperature. Effect of pressure and temperature on solubility of gases in water. That means what happens when pressure is increased or temperature is increased, how when the gases that is to be dissolved in water or any other liquid or any other solvent. So look here, what happens is that when pressure increases, or we can show it with an upward arrow, pressure increases, we'll find solubility of gas in water or any other solvent also increases. As the pressure decreases, solubility of a gas in water and in any other solvent, it will decrease. Now this is the case which we see when the cold drinks are being prepared. That is in cold drinks, those Thomson and Limca, it's a carbon dioxide which has been put into the bottle under pressure. So as the pressure on the surface of the liquid increases, we'll find more of carbon dioxide gets dissolved into the liquid. That is why when we open those cold drink bottles, you will find that gas bubbles, that effervescence coming out, that is nothing but is a carbon dioxide which has been put into the bottle under pressure, which has been dissolved into the liquid under pressure along with all the other sweeteners. So increase in pressure, that is as the pressure has been increased, that bottle has been closed under pressure, we will find that more of the carbon dioxide is dissolved, which comes out as we open the bottle, there is a pressure has been released, the pressure decreases and the gas comes out. So increase in pressure, we will find the solubility of gas in water, the liquid increases. Decrease in pressure, the solubility of gas in water or any other liquid, any other solvent, it also decreases. Next we come to the temperature. Temperature. So as the temperature increases, we will find solubility of gases, solubility of gas in water or any other liquid, will find it will decrease. So I am representing it with a downward arrow over here, and as the temperature decreases, the solubility is going to increase, just the opposite of it. Okay, so this is a case, suppose that when you take water and when you heat it, water contains dissolved oxygen. When you heat that water, when you boil that water, whatever oxygen that has been dissolved in water, that is expelled out. Why that is expelled out? Because as I told you, solubility of the gas in water, that is decreases with the increase in temperature. So when you are heating it, the temperature increases and whatever oxygen that has been dissolved in water, that comes out. And that is why we don't like to drink boiled water, because from the boiled water all the gas has been expelled out, especially the oxygen that has been expelled out, giving water a taste which is called as the flat taste. That particular taste of water where when you boil it, no, that is called as the flat taste of water, which nobody likes. Flat taste of water, which we don't like to drink. So from this we get a law. The law was given by Henry. So let me write down the law, that is at any given temperature, at any given temperature, the mass of the mass of the gas dissolved, by fixed volume of a liquid, is directly proportional to the pressure on the surface of the liquid. So this law, we call this as the Henry's law. So let me write down over here, this law is called as the Henry's law. Very important law. See that you study this law carefully. You have it in the lower classes now. You will again have it in the higher classes also again. In class 12 again you will be studying about this Henry's law, and it's very common. That is, the amount of the gas dissolved in a particular liquid is dependent on the pressure. More the pressure, more will be the amount of the gas dissolved at that particular temperature. You keep the temperature constant, but if you are increasing the pressure, the amount of the gas dissolved into the liquid also increases. If you decrease the pressure on the surface of the liquid, the amount of the gas dissolved on the surface into the liquid will also decrease. That is, with the increase in pressure, gas dissolved increases. With the increase in pressure on the surface of the liquid, when you increase the pressure on the surface of the liquid, the gas dissolved into the liquid at that particular temperature increases. When you decrease the pressure on the surface of the liquid, the amount of the gas dissolved into that liquid also decreases. This law, we call this as Henry's law. Sorry, I made a mistake. Sorry, this will be Henry's law. Henry's law. Henry. Henry's law. Okay, students. So this is the effect of pressure and temperature on solubility of gases in water or any other liquids. Thank you, students.